Well, hello and welcome again to the 2020 BIF digital season. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce you to Kate Whitley and Laura Attridge, who have been commissioned by the Buxton International Festival to create an oratorio based on climate change. Kate is a composer of piano and piano music and is based in South London. She runs the multi-story orchestra with conductor Christopher Stark, and she writes music for ballet, for concerts, for choirs, and for orchestras. She won the 2015 British Composer Award for her pieces for children's choir and orchestra entitled Alive, with words by the poet Holly McNish. And in 2018, she wrote Sky Dancers for the London Symphony Orchestra, which was performed at Trafalgar Square conducted by Sir Simon Rattle. That must have been quite a thrill, Kate, to have been there. How many people were in attendance for that event?
I don't know, thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, it was really stressful because it's like an open free event at Trafalgar Square. You can't like save seats or save space. And I really wanted my friends to come, so I made everyone come like 2 hours early, and we like sat waited because it's like almost impossible to get in if you come like at the time of the event. It's like completely rammed. Yeah, it was really cool.
And we have asked Laura Attridge to create the libretto for us. Laura is a maker of opera and theatre, and she's also a poet, a published poet. And she has a song cycle that has been premiered at the Glyndebourne Festival and also the Royal College of Music. What's fascinating about Laura is that she studied vocal studies at ROCM, which I'm sure has helped you enormously in terms of as a writer to understand the relationship between words and music. She also has a very strong relationship with composer Lewis Murphy and has produced several theatre opera works with him. Most recently in 2019, they wrote a youth opera which premiered at the Limbury Theatre in London. She's also director of opera and has directed many operas, and we would have seen her perform her opera Così fan tutti at Buxton this year had it been for COVID, because she was touring with the English touring opera. So Laura, it's great to have you with us, and thank you both for participating in this festival of digital online, a first for Buxton. So I have to ask, what was your first thoughts when you were approached to write and compose an oratorio based on climate change? Kate?
It was sort of a dream commission, I think. Like, I'd written stuff on that topic before, and it's obviously such an important thing for people to be thinking about now, and particularly because this is so focused on like young people's point of view, and with young people performing it, which again is something that I've done a lot in my other work. It's so nice to get asked to do something that like really like something you would have wanted to do yourself. It's rare to get a commission that is yeah, like such a great brief.
And for you, Laura?
Very similar, actually. I try with all of my artistic output to reflect the times that we're living in, and engage with questions about our lifetime and the future. And like Kate, I've done a lot of work with young people and find them and the perspectives that they bring and the energy they bring enormously inspiring. So absolutely the same for me. It encapsulates so much of what I love doing and what I do best. And it was also the opportunity to write my first oratorio, so I absolutely leapt at the chance.
And it's quite a big topic, Laura. How did you find your way into it? Because it's a tricky subject. It's so critical and has had so much scrutiny from all quarters. And as an artist coming to it, wanting to create a work of art, what was that sort of process like for you?
So I have quite a holistic initial research process for any project, where I follow various rabbit holes as they appear, often on YouTube with TED Talks, with articles, Poor Kate got invited to a Dropbox where I was keeping all the links, and I said, you don't have to look at any of these, it's fine, but just in case you want to see what's going on in my brain. So I was looking at a lot of scientific information to inform myself about the latest research. I was also then looking at articles and footage of the protests by young people across the world. And through that sort of process of really churning through a lot of materials and allowing them to collide and to sort of percolate over time in my head, and as I was creating fragments of text, I really found that I was much more interested in creating a work that was emotive, because as I'm sure both of you know, so much research tells us, and so much evidence out there in the world now tells us, that we as human beings are much more moved to action by something emotive, by a narrative, by a call to action that is from the heart, and something that has a sort of, I guess, a cry to it than statistics. So for me, so much of what Greta Thunberg is doing, for example, is she's not saying, here are all the facts. She's saying, I'm causing a fuss, I'm standing up, now go and look at the science. She's not pretending to be a scientist, she's an activist, and she's calling attention to the need to go and educate ourselves on a particular subject. And I think that's, for me, that's what the text is aspiring to do, is to give voice to emotions and to experiences, and to urge the listener, the watcher, to go and do their research, to go and make a difference themselves.
And then, Kate, when you read the text that Laura was working on and sort of creating, your response to it from a musical point of view, the language that you wanted to adopt, and also the form of the oratorio is quite interesting. How did you approach it, and what was your thought process behind the creation of the score?
I would like really echo what Laura said about it wanting to be something emotive, and it, like, music is like not the best medium for like conveying technical information, so it's sort of by default this had to be something that was about putting across the feeling behind it, and like persuading people, or giving people something to like recognize the feeling they might have in that, or persuade them to think or feel in a certain way. So that's really like the motivation behind the music as well. Yeah, I don't know about form, because like we talk quite a lot about the structure, so it's got two different children's choirs, one slightly older, one younger, and then there's opera soloists that are earth, sky and water. So the structure ended up being sections where the two different children's choirs sing independently. So they've got their own bits, and then bits where it's all of them and all the singers together, and then the three solo singers having their own bits. So that was kind of what the structure initially was built around, was like separating that out. Yeah, which musically is a really nice way to do it, because you get a chance to like showcase each different part, and then also the bits where like everyone is as one.
Mm. And what have you learned from your experience with working with young voices? Because what we're doing at the festival is creating a 100-strong voice, youth voice choir. And these are all young people that have been in projects in the festival in the previous year. And were dead keen this year to be involved. And unfortunately, they probably will have moved on by next year, but we will be resourcing new voices to join us. But in terms of writing music for young voices, what have you learned about what the young vocal student can do with his voice, particularly if you've got, what is the age group of the first choir we're looking at?
So it's primary school and secondary school.
That's right.
Yeah, so slightly different things in those two age groups, but sort of similar. Yeah, I mean, it's been like a massive learning curve for me from when I first started writing for young voices, which is like quite a few years ago now. And so much of it is how you teach them. So if you're teaching something that they're not going to read the music, it's got to be like constructed in a way that they can easily remember the structure, and that you like straight away understand how it's put together, because it's not, you're not like reading a script each time, you need to remember each part of it. So loads of that is about repetition. Yeah, I think like repetition for ease of learning, and also just range, because often if you've not sung a lot, you can't get high notes, and luckily I'm really bad at singing and can only sing quite low, which is basically the same as most kids. So I always like test it against, if it's something that I can sing all right, it's probably going to be okay.
Okay. And Laura, when we were looking at creating the soloists, where was your thoughts around what the solos represent in this work, and how did you come to the ideas that you came to, and explain a little bit about their roles?
So what excites me, or what excited me about the oratorio opportunity was the possibility of having narrative, but perhaps narrative in a more abstract way than we might in an opera. And so these soloists offered an opportunity to multi-role in a way, or to represent something larger than a body on stage, being a single human being. And I was very excited by the idea of the tutti movements, which create a middle and an end for the piece, being the whole world, the whole earth speaking. And these three soloists in those movements became voices for the elements, so that they sing with the massed voices of the choirs as well, and we hear the earth speak in different states. And then I had one aria available for each singer, and for me each of those became a human being telling their story of the effects of climate change right now, because during my research I encountered lots of extraordinary stories of those, particularly those less privileged, sharing the effects of climate change that are happening right now, that many of us are privileged enough to be able to ignore or to put to the side for the moment. But it really, I wanted to bring an immediacy to those human beings' experiences. So two of those solos, arias, are for people experiencing climate change and the impact of that, and one is an astronaut. Our sky element soloist is an astronaut experiencing what's called Earthrise, or the effect of seeing the Earth from space, and the perspective that gives you as an astronaut, this idea that we are all living on the same planet and we're responsible for that planet. So ideas of perspective, I think, of different perspectives we can have on the issue, were really exciting to bring the soloists to that.
And the three soloist voices, in terms of their range, Kate, we were looking at the different parts. Talk a little bit about writing for those three different voice types.
So it's a soprano, a mezzo, and a bass, and
no tenor.
No tenor.
No tenor.
Not so keen on that. No. Yeah, I've always found tenors like really hard to write for. I don't know why. Yeah, and I've written so much for the other voice types that I really know like what the right bit of the voice to write in is. Yeah, so that made most sense to me.
And when you start scoring the piece, how do you plan it? How do you start laying out the kind of sound world that you want to encapsulate and to produce?
I did it all on the piano first. Wow. So it starts with the piano score, which is also really helpful, because then for rehearsal sessions it sort of exists well as a piano piece, especially for kids. That is really helpful, because it means they can be supported by something that really works as a piano part. If you go straight to orchestrating it, it always then feels like you're kind of unraveling what you did to make a piano part. So I think that's really helpful. So it exists first with piano score, and then it's like colouring and putting in the colours, like when you then layer it out for the orchestra.
That is really interesting. Most of the composers that I have worked with tend to go straight to the orchestration. Yeah. They don't view the piano score as important, and then at the end of the process I say, and we'll need the piano score by this day. Piano score? Piano score? What?
Yeah.
Piano score.
Oh, no, it's so funny.
Yes, piano score. How are we supposed to get this into rehearsal? So it's very refreshing to hear you start with a piano score first, and then you expand from that basis, don't you? Then it's done.
And I think because I play the piano, like I'm really used to working in that way. Yeah, I think it saves a lot of time as well. And it's just how I like writing, because also then you really like, you write it physically because you're there, like feeling it, touching it, when you play it. And I really like that process. And I think that I always have in mind like the sounds that I think it's going to be when it is the orchestra. Even when you're doing it on the piano, I know this is the sort of sound it's going to be here. And yeah, orchestrating it is a bit like, then that's the fun bit, because the hard bit is when you've taken away all of the textures and different sounds of the orchestra. You really have to like clarify what notes you want. So that's the hard part, is doing the piano score, and then it's like you got through the hard bit, and then you get the treat of like orchestrating it at the end.
So Laura, would you like to read us a section of the oratorio and just give us a context for it?
Absolutely. So this is the text for the final movement, the final tutti movement of the oratorio, where we perhaps glimpse a little bit of hope for the future. And just if it's of interest in terms of the way that I sent this to Kate, unlike perhaps some of the other sections, I sent this to her in two sections that I'll read to you, one after the other. And I said, you can allocate this text in any way you like. So it's a very free invitation to use this across the forces, the soloists, the choirs, in any way that she wished. It's called The World Awakens. The world awakens like a flower, like an eye, like a mouth uttering its first sounds, like a hand, like an infant, like a tree unfurling new leaves, opening into the unknown to begin and begin and begin again. Under my feet, roots push deeper into the earth, taking hold. Across my hands, currents flow, tides rise and fall like breath. Above my head, stars appear, radiant through clear, bright air.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you very much. And when you write that, as a singer, are you singing something in your head when you write?
No, I don't put melody to my text. I mean, sometimes I do a little sing-song if I'm writing a cute little jingle or something. I make up my own tune. But usually I will read it in a slightly exaggerated way, the way I just read it to you now, with feeling through the breath in a line, the vowel matching, sort of feeling out each line for its meter and where the emphasis sits and whether it will flow well. I don't always get it 100%, but that I do sort of sit and talk to myself for a while and sort of test out lines and see if they work with the breath. So the singing background really helps.
And then Kate, when you get those texts, I mean, give us the opening two phrases again, Laura.
The world awakens like a flower.
When you hear that or see that on the page, what happens to your brain that suddenly goes, right, here's the melody? How does that sort of come to you, as it were?
I think it's so much what Laura just said about the timing and the breath and saying it. You just like try and feel what the spacing and the rhythm in the words is, and then that like gives you an outline of what the melody might be, because you start with like the rhythm that is already in the words.
It was interesting. I worked with a Swedish composer, and he said to me, please will you tape the text, and so that he could actually have the text taped, that when he was composing, he was listening to the inflection. I suspect maybe because he was Swedish and English wasn't his first language and was having to write it, but he used a lot of that inflection as a guide into the world of melody. And I found that really interesting to see cool. How my inflection had sort of inferred a melody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so nice hearing Laura read it. I kind of wish I'd asked her to like.
Ah, there you go. That's a trick for her. You should have recorded it for her.
I have to be honest, I would usually, unless there's something, I mean, there's a couple of pieces I've written where perhaps there's a chorus or something where I've heard a really specific rhythm in my head and I thought, yes, it needs to be, I've heard a triplet there, that's why I've written this thing that seems perhaps out of rhythm. But for me, often when I hand a text over, the composer finds a version of that text which is so much more interesting than me just doing a single reading. And every time I read it differently. So actually I'd much rather Kate take it on and hear what she hears.
Yeah, that's true. So share with us your first experience of an oratorio. When did you hear your first oratorio and what impact did it make on you?
I have no idea.
I think I sang Vivaldi's Gloria at school a few times.
Okay.
And I absolutely love that music. But it hasn't been a form that I've actively gone out and sought to listen to a lot, I have to admit.
Okay.
Yeah.
UK?
I remember seeing the John Adams El Nino at the South Bank.
Right.
I saw that too.
2 years ago. Yeah. That was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing of like the mass group and then the soloist that stand out from that. I remember thinking that was it's such a cool form. Yeah, that's the only one I can really think of.
And my aunt and gran took me as an 8-year-old to go and hear the Messiah. I fell asleep at some point in the Messiah and tried very carefully not for them to notice, and then was woken up by the Hallelujah chorus. And that made such an impression on me because then I didn't fall asleep after that. I was so taken by it. I think the static nature of an oratorio it allows one to listen solely to the music and to engage on a sort of a less visual way than one does in opera, and that it sort of can creep into you. And that's why I think they call them opera oratorios, the ones that are specifically around that. So we're really hoping that our young people will take to this and will have their first experience of, as you did, singing the Gloria. They'll be saying, "Oh, we sang the Whitley piece," you know. So, in conclusion, then, Kate, we are very excited with the partnership that we have with ROSL and with the multi-story orchestra, and we really hope that next year we'll be able to just do exactly as we were planning this year. Tell us a little bit about the Peckham young people that you have lined up for this.
With the recording.
Yes.
So we've been like, obviously because it's not possible to do actual events, we're in the process of recording a little bit from this piece, just the last section, and we've got our musicians to record it, just playing their parts individually at home, and the 3 opera singers to do it. The next stage, which is about to start, is then getting the kids from the schools we work with in Peckham to record it as well. Which is going to be a mixture of like the kids that are now in school or have been coming into school to do it in school with their teachers, or kids at home to do it through the computer. Which is like such a massive unknown for all of us, how that's going to be. But the bit that we've got so far doesn't have the kids on yet, but it's got the orchestra and the soloists. So we've got that, which you can hear.
So everybody listening to this, we're going to play out with a section of the oratorio, which Kate has recorded with the multi-story musicians, and they've all been playing it in their living room, and she's been mixing it all together. So you will have heard it first here, and it'll give you a real taste of what to expect next year, where we will once again be mounting the oratorio. So Laura and Kate, thank you so much for taking time out of lockdown to talk to us and to share with us this project. We're so looking forward to putting it on next year, and we have plans to do it in London. I would love to take it down to Cape Town and do it in Cape Town, and there's even possibilities of taking us to Europe. So let's hope that the premiere next year will bring about great things. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Really
nice to see you.
awakens and begins to open. The world awakens, opens like a flower. The world awakens, opens like a light. The world awakens, opens like a mouth, uttering its first sounds, unfurling its leaves, to begin again and again and again and again.
Across my hands currents flow, tides rise and fall like breath. Under my feet, roots grow deeper, reaching through earth, taking hold. Above my head, stars appear, radiant through clear bright air. Across my hands, above my head, stars appear, tides rise and taking hold.
The world awakens and begins to open. The world awakens, opens like a flower. The world awakens, opens like a light. The world awakens, opens like a mouth, uttering its first sounds, unfurling